Hello everyone, this is part 2 of What If Naruto Ran Away From Home, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Not even his dreams were he safe from her. He was 7 again and she was on top of him. Again. Mommy loves you, Naru. She whispered into the boy's ear in a voice that gave him chills. She was lying on his right. He tried to curl away from her, weakly pushing her hand off his lower abdomen so he could roll off the bed, but she trailed her tongue up his cheek and her iron grip forced him back in place. Her right hand ghosted over his stomach and he whimpered when it teased the top of his underwear. Don't you know Mommy loves you? He couldn't move. Her delicate fingers dipped into his underwear and the red-eyed boy cried. His voice echoed but never left the room. He wrenched his eyes away from hers and clenched them shut as dread pulled up in his chest, forcing him down and making him weak against her gentle touch. He didn't want this. Her breath was coming out in thin clouds from her mouth as she rubbed him beneath his underwear, taking his squeaks to be that of pleasure and intensifying her carnal ministrations. He was weak. He was scared. Every time she looked at him, every time she touched him, every time she spoke to him, he could not move. He begged her to stop. Every time she did this, whispered words laced with dark fear for his life, and unexplainable fear for his life, begging her to leave him alone. She never listened and muffled his words with her mouth. Naruto jolted awake with a snort as soon as he heard the quiet sound of metal scraping against the lock of his front door. He groaned sleepily and fell off the couch, content with just lying on the ground and covering his eyes with his left forearm. He hated waking up like this, as this content only lasted for a few short seconds before his dream flooded back to him. The boy groaned when hurried whispers accompanied the sounds of metal on the door. He tried to shake off his nightmare. His heart was banging in his chest and his head throbbed painfully, still feeling the potent remnants of terror wreck his soul, tearing it to pieces. He fisted his hair and knelt down, focusing his mind on his breathing. Inhaling deeply and exhaling lightly, on and on until he finally heard I pulling him back to reality with its words. He fell onto his back and rubbed his eyes to rid him of any tears. It is 11:05 a.m., boss. HNNNG, what is it? He asked his computer concerning the noises coming from outside his door. 5 armed men are trying to forcefully enter this apartment, sir. Of course they are. Naruto muttered and rolled onto his belly, pushing his face off the ground and saying, armed how? The small camera on the top of the top word and scanned each man outside. Kitchen knives, tanto, kunai, and 3 of them are carrying backpacks. All 5 men are wearing ski masks, sir. The computer watched its master lazily grab his katana and flicked off the sheath, sluggishly moving towards the door with the lethally sharp blade dragging on the ground. He hummed and placed his ear against the door. Who robs a house at 11 in the morning? The red-eyed boy whispered. His Yakuza neighbor left her house at 8 in the morning to her job, and those that did not leave the apartment building in the morning were either conked out with hangovers, still dozing off from drugs, or lazy and unemployed. He stayed on the 3rd floor of 5 floors and there weren't that many reliable places to rob from, so they usually saw the apartment of the boy that was hardly ever around and wore good, clean clothes as a target. Naruto had at least 10 robbery attempts in a month, which was small compared to a few other rooms in the very same apartment building. They just didn't learn. If they really wanted to enter, then they should at least break down his door, instead of going the stealthy way and picking his lock. The boy heard the people curse at their inability to pick open a computer-controlled, impossible lock I could only put in place when its master was inside the apartment. He placed the tip of his blade on his door and listened hard with his head against the door. The blade was about 5 inches close to his face. His tongue stuck out from the corner of his lips and he slowly dragged the tip down the wooden door about 1.5 inches before he pushed hard. The katana slickly cut through the wooden door and stabbed clean through the right shoulder of one of the robbers, who squealed in pain. The others only had time to blink twice before the silver katana was pulled back into the door of the apartment they were trying to break into, then slid out again and cut through the neck of the same robber he stabbed first. What the hell? Naruto pulled his blade back inside, ignoring the blood dripping down the weapon, and listened as the robbers turned tail and ran, leaving behind one choking on his own blood. Blood pooled around him as he gurgled for air, grasping his throat in the vain hope of closing up the wound. The door creaked open and dull red eyes that would haunt any lesser man stood over him. Naruto looked with distaste at the blood under the man's head but still placed the tip of his katana on the dying man's forehead. Puke. He choked pitifully, hoping for some sort of mercy. The boy with blood-red eyes pushed down his sword, all the while silently staring into the dark brown eyes of the dumb robber. Some people on his floor, mostly those of the lazy and unemployed class, peered out of their rooms and gawked at the scene. A boy with bright green hair standing over a grown man with a sword impaled through his head. The boy looked up, not in the least bit fazed by the fact that he had just killed a man, and his eyes narrowed slightly at him. His iris became a bit smaller and took a darker shade of red. The message was clear. If the police came, then he was going to murder everyone. They quietly closed the doors and gave the boy his privacy. The boy got a good look at his victim, a man that looked to be in his late 20s, wearing a black turtleneck sweater and black pants with black sandals. He looked to have been well funded, and that roused the Runaway's suspicion. Why weren't they using better technology to rob him? Hell, why were they robbing him in the first place? He couldn't have looked like he had much. Naruto rummaged through the man's pockets and retrieved a few loose change, just a handful of crumpled rue notes, stashing them into his pants pocket. After further inspection, he found a wallet in his back pocket. He pursed his lips and hummed, standing up and leaving the katana blade sticking out from the dead man's head. He opened the wallet, and this time he didn't pick out the money but went straight for the man's identification, of which he had none. The only thing he found was a picture the man had taken with his daughter and son, which Naruto threw away without a second thought, and a handwritten letter from the man's parents. Naruto gathered, from the letter, that the man's name was Chizori and he was a native of Fire Country but his parents stayed in Grass Country. Naruto's lips became straight when he saw Grass Country in the letter. The boy could still feel sleep tickling at a corner of his mind, and he would admit that, due to his frustration at being woken up from his slumber, he had executed this warning kill messily. He could have done it a whole lot cleaner. This was why the boy read the letter again. He wiped his hand on his pants, though it wasn't stained with blood, and rubbed his eyes to get the last relics of sleep out. Reading it for a third time, simply to confirm his alarm, and it was now blaringly clear. The letter was written in subtle codes. He briefly wondered how the geniuses that had tried to pick his lock had been able to decipher the coded language, but dismissed that thought in favor of reading it through, cracking the codes he knew and assuming what the rest said. Boy with red eyes. Find him. Bring him to sound. Do not make noise. Do not fail. That was as much as he could translate from the 10-lined letter written by Chizori's parents. Naruto took the man's backpack off, idly saying, "Find the other 4 and keep tabs on them." "Yes, sir," I responded, and used Konoha's security cameras to watch the 4 survivors. Naruto had initially planned to scare any other future robber with his act, not really caring if the others left alive, but now it seemed his secret life would soon be in jeopardy. Inside the bag, Naruto found a new set of clothes, some packets of food, some bottles of water and a single sealing scroll. Naruto's quick mind correctly assumed that they planned to run off with him as soon as they got him. He frowned imperceptibly and used the sealing scroll to seal away the dead body, using the spare t-shirt to mop up the blood and seal that away as well. Now there was only a noticeable red patch on the ground, and that was enough for Naruto, so he picked up his sword, slung the backpack over his right shoulder, of which the letter was crumpled up inside, and he stomped into his apartment room with narrowed eyes. The door boomed behind him. The people Orochimaru had hired had mediocre training at best and were only hired hands, not real sound shinobi, but that was how much the Sannin underestimated him. He removed the letter from the bag and tossed it onto the 6-by-6-foot glass platform in the middle of his living room. Examine that for Orochimaru's fingerprints. He had collected the missing Sannin's prints during an exploration of a forest east of Konoha 2 years ago, when he was scouting out from any holes in Konoha's defense he could capitalize on. He found no holes, though he did find a rundown laboratory. Using Naruto's computerized goggles as a focal point, dutifully scanned the entire structure and reported that rot-ridden books and a few discarded lab coats had the Snake Sage's name on them. He was also able to get fingerprints, and any book he was able to find was immediately scanned into Ai's memory bank. The physical books were then subsequently set on fire while the digital copies were precisely filed away until when Naruto needed them or Ai wanted to use them for reference in a future problem. 3 seconds later, done. And Orochimaru of the Sannin's fingerprints have been confirmed to be on the letter, boss. The boy hummed and muttered to himself. I only wanted to know. Sir, confirm whether or not the people Orochimaru sent don't have direct ties with him. There was a moment of low whirring sounds from the supercomputer and I took pictures it had taken of each of the failed robbers and compared them with that the Konoha police had in their own database, as well as that of computers in the whole country with security footage. 2 of them have history in police detention for assault and armed robbery, one is the half-brother to another, the half-brother's picture was connected to one of the robbers that had been in jail. That half-brother lives on the 4th floor, which explained how they knew where Naruto lived. And the last 2 have families that are deep in debt in the Fire Country capital. How did they get to Konoha? I don't know, but a large sum of money was transferred into their account from an account in the country and withdrawn that same day. I would have asked whether Naruto wanted to know the name on the account that transferred the money, but it knew that its creator wouldn't care, and for good reason too. The account was obviously under an alias. Orochimaru paid off the debtors and gave them this job. I filed this summary. Its master had proposed a way for it to use when a similar situation came up in the future. Naruto scratched his chin and sheathed his blade. So they aren't connected to the snake. Good. He had not changed since he came back from work in the brothel's bar, so his short-sleeved, button-up white shirt and his black slacks were rumpled since he slept in them. Nonetheless, he didn't care much how he looked. He couldn't let the other 4 to get out of Konoha, even if it was breaking his rule of staying away from daylight as much as possible. So he fixed on his goggles and perched his katana on his left shoulder, undoing his top button and slinging up a single suspender onto his right shoulder. He didn't care if his targets had families, he was going to kill them before they could tell anyone what they knew. Where are they? The 4, now unfortunate, armed robbers never knew any such terror than what they were experiencing now. They were running headlong through the red light district on their way outside the entrance gate to the district, making sure that they were in full view of the people. The passing people in the district watched them, full-grown men in obvious burglary garb, fleeing for dear life, pelting down the street as fast as their legs could carry them. Their ski masks made it all the more clear that they were coming from a robbery, but with how raggedly they were running, one didn't need to guess to know that they had failed. They had limited ninja training. 3 of them were former genin and 1, the half-brother, dropped out of the academy after only a year. Yet what they knew escaped them. The person they had tried to kidnap was much smarter than they thought, smart enough to kill one without even leaving his home. They had been stealing and kidnapping for years now, and they knew the warning signs for when a job was simply just too much for them. This job was too much for them. One of them yelped in shock as he spied, from the corner of his eyes, a red-eyed boy holding a sheathed blade and wearing a black ski mask. He was gone as soon as he saw him. Why the fuck did you accept this job, Koru? The half-brother that saw the masked boy yelled, too shaken up by what he saw to lower his voice. How the hell should I have known this kid could kill? The man replied. You live in the same apartment, you fucking idiot. The other half-brother, the ex-convict, shouted back before he grunted when he ran face first into a solid brick wall. He pushed off the wall with wide, horrified eyes, noticing that his 3 other comrades had face planted into the wall like him. How the hell did we get here? The last of the 4 living robbers cried, turning around in a full circle. They were standing at the far end of an alley and, to their absolute horror, across the street from them was the very same apartment building they were running from. Oh shit. Naruto phased into sight behind the cursor and his blade appeared again, sheathed deep through the man's back and shooting out his front, impaling his heart. The boy twisted and tore through the human body horizontally to his right, slicing off the upper part of a man's head and kicking the dead body so that it tangled against one of the robbers that was about to run away again. The boy turned around on his heels and threw the blade at the other running robber, and the katana sunk deep through the back of the man's neck. The person stumbled and fell down onto his face, gasping and clawing at his neck, where 2.5 inches of the dangerously sharp weapon poked out from the front. There was about 10 yards of space in the dead-end alley, and the man had only made it about a yard before he was brought down by the thrown katana. It was all using a simple misdirection genjutsu learned by most chunin, that made the victim think he was going one way but was in reality going where the attacker wanted him to go. The boy walked over the 2 corpses of his first 2 victims to the man that was screaming for help, trying to pry off the profusely bleeding corpse off him. Tears welled up in his eyes, knowing full well that his ex-convict half-brother was the one he was trapped under. Please. He shouted, waving his hands in front of his face as the ski mask-wearing boy with demonically red eyes approached him with clipped, unhesitant steps. The man with Naruto's katana through his neck had stopped struggling and had gotten pale, not moving. I have information. The dangerous boy stopped before the man and cocked his head to the side. Mild childish curiosity shone through his dark red eyes. He bent down on one knee and muttered, I'm listening. We were sent by Orochimaru. I know that. Next. The boy interrupted. He wants to use you as a hostage. So your father would step down as Hokage and kill himself. I could have reached that conclusion myself. Naruto said, bored. Try again. Oh shit, he was going to pawn you off to Shimura Danzo when he's done with you. The boy raised an eyebrow. Now that's new, how do you know this? The person that delivered a letter to me, he made to move so he could bring his backpack around and show Naruto his letter, but the boy raised his hand for the man to stop. I've already seen it. Sir, he told me Orochimaru wants to sell you. The boy raised a skeptical eyebrow and looked at the man disbelievingly. You're telling me that the messenger pretty much laid out the whole plan to you. Either Orochimaru was arrogant enough to tell his underlings his plans in detail, or this man was lying to him, which didn't mean that Naruto wouldn't look into it. The boy's fist snapped forward in a blaze of speed and bounced against the man's forehead with enough strength to elicit a small cracking sound. He shook his sore fist and watched as the man's eyes rolled up into his head, wincing at the light red mark on his knuckles. The runaway ended up sealing all of their bodies and weapons into one scroll and burning that scroll, though he still cleaned off the blood from his katana before doing so. He took their backpacks with him in another scroll. Just because he was bad at Fuinjutsu didn't mean he couldn't use sealing scrolls, with already have the kanji for storage drawn on it. He looked out of the alley and across the street to the apartment building he lived in. He double-checked to make sure no real ninja was around, then he shot forward in a burst of raw speed and slipped into the building. He had already forgotten about his causal killings and was wondering how he was going to get all of the blood off his clothes. The door clicked shut and I instinctively locked it behind its creator. The boy blew out a large breath of air and leaned his katana blade near the door, removing the black ski mask he wore and tossing it onto his couch. Naruto stood close to the panel of glass on the ground where all of the hologram projector lights reflected off and stared at his desk where his gloves were, their backs open and dead from inactivity. Sir, are you okay? I inquired, and, somewhere in Naruto's mind he was relieved that the supercomputer was still evolving, seeing as Naruto didn't program in any command for I to directly ask about his health. In Ai's complex mind, it thought that its master was affected by the realizations that not only were Konoha ninjas and his mother trying to find him but also Orochimaru of the Sannin, to a lesser extent, Danzo. Naruto cleared his throat and nodded solemnly. I'm fine, thank you. It's that, he furrowed his eyebrows and scratched his chin. There's been a change of plans. How so, sir? Scrap number 15 and leave only wind manipulation. He commanded, referring to the elemental manipulation schematics he had I pull up hours ago, wanting fire, water, earth and lightning to be removed, leaving only wind. A window of opportunity was open for Naruto leave Konoha and he was going to take it. The letters were hand-delivered to each of the 5 individuals earlier that week, so that meant that the messenger was possibly still in Konoha and was aware that the kidnappers moved out that morning to do the job. The messenger would find out that they were dead, because people undoubtedly heard screams from the dead-end alley and the news would somehow reach the police, inciting an investigation on the puddles of blood that would ultimately go nowhere. 2 days or so later and Orochimaru would send more people and Naruto was going to kill all of them until the right people came for him. Strong people. Smart people. Crafty people. People he knew would be able to smuggle him out of the village without the village authorities knowing or being able to catch them. He laid all of this out to Ai and, at that very moment, the computer once again evolved its manner of speaking. I could not disobey its master, though it still futilely objected to the second part of its master's plan. Boss, this is a bad idea. Next time on red lights. Naruto saw a twinkle from the corner of his eye and he slashed the sheathed katana downwards to his left, clanging dangerously against the glinting long sword that had been thrown at him from the distance. He frowned at the weapon, stabbed into the ground and oozing with a clear white liquid. He tried to remember where he had seen it before. Don't you dare touch me, he growled, tears running down from his eyes and his body trembling. Two unidentified ninjas have appeared. Yeah, I see them. Naruto said in a low voice, his red eye fixed on two new red dots that hid on the opposite side of the glade, opposite of Orochimaru. Dutifully, I rolled down a list of what it was able to gather from both secret watchers. One had fire affinity while the other, strangely enough, was predominantly made out of nature chakra. They both had incredible chakra control and only the fire affinity watcher had massive reserves. Chakra was concentrated to the person's eyes. This meant the fire affinity guy had a dojutsu. Orochimaru caught the boy as he passed out in her arms. 6 days later. Thump thump thud. Smoke wafted off Naruto's fist after the 3 consecutive blows and he blankly stood back. The man he had planted into the wall gaped in horror as his chest pulsed out with blood. He fell onto his knees and Naruto swept aside, allowing the man to fall onto his face. Naruto frowned disapprovingly and shook his hand, sore from the fast-paced punches he had previously unleashed. It was 9 in the night and he was in training ground 41, a training ground that was densely packed with trees and shrubbery, so the chances of him being heard were slim. The boy's red eyes turned to the right, away from the last dead victim, and he pulled out his katana from the lower back of another dead sound shinobi. He led them here and they followed like sheep, not caring that the night was only lit up by the stars in the sky and his eternally activated Sharingan eyes made seeing much easier in dim lighting. The night was his turf and, though they fought him very seriously, they went with him into the dark forest-like training ground so as to blindly accomplish their mission. They failed his test. The 5th team had failed his test. The boy quietly sheathed the sword with a click and placed the sheathed weapon onto his right shoulder, running a mildly frustrated hand through his mint green hair and blowing out a dissatisfied breath. He had to ask the matron for permission to leave and this was really not worth the effort. Sure, the capture teams came at closer intervals and they got stronger with each group but they weren't strong or smart enough for Naruto to trust them to successfully take him out the village. Naruto saw a twinkle from the corner of his eye and he slashed the sheathed katana downwards to his left, clanging dangerously against the glinting long sword that had been thrown at him from the distance. He frowned at the weapon, stabbed into the ground and oozing with a clear white liquid. He tried to remember where he had seen it before. Throaty laughter echoed through the training ground and the boy ground his teeth when he heard a slight hissing undertone from the sound. You certainly are a curious one, child. Naruto spun on his heel and swirled around towards the voice behind him, slashing his sheathed blade but it was deflected against a pale milk-sleeved forearm. The newcomer's hand shot forward to grab the boy by his face but Naruto ducked under the swipe and rolled on his backwards thrice, flicking the sheath of his blade off as he did so and rising to his feet into a rigid kenjutsu stance. The person tutted with condescending disapproval, analyzing the genius inventor's stance with a sweep of her coal-black reptilian eyes. Sloppy, sloppy, sloppy. Naruto's eyes bugged out and his knees trembled as he beheld the person standing across from him. Orochimaru. He breathed, feeling fear and dread start to lock up his limbs and close up his mind. "BBBB, but aren't you?" The female ran a slender finger on her smooth cheeks and licked her dark purple painted lips, hissing seductively. "One of my many, many faces." He had 3 females come after him and they weren't that much of a threat. Now it was a Sannin and she came as a woman. The killer intent rolling off the woman made the boy gulp and his hands cramped up, unable to properly hold the blade again. He gulped as she cackled at his petrified fear, eyes wide and nose flaring to get as much air into his system as possible else he would topple off his feet. "You don't seem that bad. Not as bad as Kabuto keeps telling me." A hand clamped down on his shoulder and, on instinct, the boy's elbow snapped back and crushed the person's nose. He then judo flipped his aggressor over his shoulder and leaped back a step as Orochimaru began slithering up to him. He saw that the person he had just beaten was a person with white hair and large glasses. He was shaking off the cobwebs in his head and grunting to his feet with his hand covering his broken nose, feeling it heal under his palm. The Sannin was closing in at a gradual pace, saying with an eyebrow raised, captivated. "Oh, I stand corrected." She disregarded Naruto's fallen weapon and walked over it, licking her lips again and tittering. "I'll have so much fun with you, dear child." Naruto skipped back twice and grunted as he slammed into her presence. He swiftly avoided the swiping hands that reached to grab him, terror-struck that the person had 6 arms and wore a chillingly cruel grin. He sent a straight kick to his right to a person that wanted to grab him again and a pale white person with black dots on his blocked it with his arms crossed before his face. Naruto felt his leg react to the unusually strong block and reared back. Two more people appeared beside the strong-boned man, and the horror-filled daze the boy was in prevented him from seeing them clearly. He was fighting for every breath of air, grabbing his chest with his sweaty right hand and swinging his other hand around him for the Sound 4 and Kimimaro to stay away from him. I was not there with him, seeing as he had the supercomputer stay back in the apartment in case Naruto ever found the right group of kidnappers. He found them. And he was terrified. He saw flashes of red hair and loving purple eyes as Orochimaru slid up close to him. He clenched his teeth and stumbled backwards, raggedly panting. The Sannin quirked up an eyebrow at his expression but lowered herself down, only for Naruto to shoot back up with a strong headbutt for the Sannin between her eyebrows. "Don't you dare touch me," he growled, tears running down from his eyes and his body trembling. Adrenaline spiked but his legs crumpled under him. The snake lady smoothly overcame the pain and grabbed the boy by his cheeks, towering over him and pouring more and more killer intent from her body and onto the suffering child with a sadistic smile. Naruto's mouth dropped open and his eyes rolled up into his head. Orochimaru caught the boy as he passed out in her arms. She stashed the boy into a large black chest and it was hefted up by the spider-based member of the Sound 4. As they leaped into the tree line towards Hidden Sound, none of them noticed that the sharp edge of Naruto's discarded katana softly pulsed with dark purple light and slowly retreat into the darkness of the forest, towards the red light district. The sheath dutifully followed. Naruto's apartment lit up with dark purple light and the goggle neatly placed on the work desk buzzed briefly with energy. I activated itself as soon as its master was incapacitated and the disapproval and a subtle thirst for justice rang through the computer's light voice as a clear recording of how Naruto had gone down processed through its vast mind. I's defensiveness flared and the purple light dimmed, leaving only the black-tinted goggles spinning in thought. I is fully operational. Suddenly, all the light went out and several loud clicks resonated through the room. 15 minutes later and a midnight black duffel bag shattered Naruto's bedroom window, blasting out into Konoha's night sky. 4 fist-sized, shadow-swaddled cubes flew out after the bag, propelled through the sky with heated gusts of wind. "Hang on, boss." A few minutes later. With Orochimaru, no one could have seen it coming. The moonless, starlit sky did not reflect its light as it shot its way under the shadows of the foliage. Its hum was covered by the sound of insects in the night. It didn't use any chakra. None whatsoever. It was practically invisible until it was too late. The only person in the high-ranking Sound Ninja procession, led by Kimimaro and flanked behind by Orochimaru, was the boy that was folded up inside the black casket. He felt the soothing feeling of Konoha's barrier passing his body and then the empty, cold shudder of the fresh air outside of the village, shivering and shaking before he jolted awake with a quick, mildly violent shake. His red eyes snapped open as his keen ears heard a buzz from outside his box prison. He blinked his eyes twice and tried to move his arms, grunting tiredly as his body was restrained to only inside the casket. Seal reinforced to keep anyone but Orochimaru from being able to open it, making it near impossible for him to open it from the inside. He could only curl up into a ball and braced for impact as I maneuvered Naruto's katana, sheathing the weapon into the left side of Kimimaro's chest. The juggernaut's wail shook the ground and they were all at alert, surprised to see the deadly blade driven through the heart of their comrade but not seeing who had done it. The box tumbled out of the man's top pair of arms as he fell onto his knees, crashing down onto the high branch he landed on. They were about 100 feet off the ground on big and tall trees and the chest Naruto was kept in fell down this great height. He prepared for the wincing groan for when he would land until a wave of air pulsed through the box. A corner of Naruto's lips curled up and the lid of the chest popped open after a solid, cramped punch above his head. He leaped out of the chest as it bounced on the dry leaves packed under the trees and barely caught a tree branch with his left hand. His heart was thumping loudly in his chest from the adrenaline rush and he pulled himself up onto the branch. There was no time to rest as the mad Sannin shot down headfirst from the top of the tree, ignoring the fact that Kidomaru could have died if not that his heart was on the other side of his chest. She wore an insane grin. Naruto swallowed thickly and purposely fell down backwards into the pitch blackness of the bottom of the extremely tall trees of the Akasui forest, borderland to grass country. He had his arms outstretched and his eyes calmly closed. The green-haired boy's whole body was enveloped into the darkness and 4 black cubes blazed from above after him, passing Orochimaru in bursts of wind that was able to surprise the Sannin. She too entered the darkness under the trees. Wind dagger. A high-pitched whistle later and Orochimaru barely jumping out of the way, though a sizable chunk of her right thigh was carved out. Her snake-like eyes adapted to the darkness as she hissed in pain, forcing herself to heel, looking around for the culprit. There was a flash of red and a kunai slid out from her sleeve, slashing at another blast of incredibly sharp wind. She sliced the practically invisible attack in half, but her defending hand was shredded beyond recognition. The Sannon forced down the winds expertly and barely fell onto her back in time before a wind dagger impaled her head, only taking with it a few strands of her midnight black hair. A heavy boom sounded in the darkness around her and her eyes caught a shadowy blur fly up into the sky. She licked her lips, very intrigued at the new stunt the Namikaze Born had pulled, and yelled to her subordinates, who were scrambling to understand what the hell was happening. Get him. The katana that was visibly weakening the spider summoner ripped itself out of the man's chest and rocketed after the black blur that bolted away from the Sannon. The blur began to drop from the sky and the ninjas blazed towards it. Oh. Naruto felt his boots begin to overheat and he muttered to his eye goggles. Power down my boots. He started dropping out of the sky, completing the aerial arc he started from the point he blasted away from the Sannon in desperation. He grit his teeth in effort and opened his arms, spreading out his glove-covered fingers as far apart as possible, frantically saying, slow down, slow down, slow down, slow down. He sighed in relief as a quick gust of wind from his palms and his feet blew out, preventing him from fully crash landing into the thick darkness of the forest. His feet touched down on a lower branch of a tree and it immediately snapped under his weight. He swore under his breath and landed on his hands and feet on the ground. Shit. He looked up and shot forwards. Give me a path to the closest town in Waterfall Country. I replied in an elated tone. Yes, sir. The black-tinted front of the computer goggles flickered with white light for a moment before the ground under Naruto's feet lit up with soft red light only Naruto could see through his goggles, and the boy pelted down this path on his feet, his arms flying behind him and his head lowered in concentration. He swerved around trees and ran through shrubs, stomping them under his heavy though mobile boots and continuing on at breakneck speed, propelled forward with small bursts of wind every 10 seconds. Under his super sophisticated goggles his red eyes looked to the top left and he saw a rotating map of the country and a green blip, him, moving along a set path north of the country, the red path, and a number of red dots closing in on him from behind. He didn't feel like counting, so he asked I to count for him. How many are they? 10, sir. Can you identify any? Naruto asked and his right hand closed around his katana blade from behind while his left caught the sheath from his side. His interest was further piqued when he vividly remembered seeing. I am only able to identify 4, boss. I collected data from the audio files in the sharp sword and images it was able to take on its way to Naruto. It highlighted the people as he named them off. Orochimaru of the Sannon, the red dot at the far back blinked yellow and then returned back to red. Kabuto Yakushi, Kisame Hoshigaki and Kakashi Hatake. Naruto controlled his reaction to a hate-filled curse. The dots looked to be adapting to his chakra-less wind-enhanced speed and were getting closer. He was an excellent sensor but the dense nature chakra in the air was too choking for someone like him to comprehend on the fly with these many ninjas after him, so he delegated some of the sensory responsibilities to I. This came in handy when he was occupied with other things than sensing threats. I was a reliable aid and that was enough. The boy then made his decision. I can't run from all of them, so I need to take care of as many as I can. Water jutsu incoming. I warned and the inventor flipped over the tunneling shark. He could hear Kakashi harshly scolding Kisame for nearly ripping into the boy's back and the goggle-wearing boy jumped higher up the trees till he was tree-hopping. He threw his sheath away and it soared into the night. The boy then shook his now free left hand and 7 shuriken wiggled out of his glove. He blindly threw them behind him and he used his eyes to control them as they spread out. The bone user used his right forearm to swipe away a shuriken and boom. The explosion threw him off and 2 of his other sound comrades. The boy's fingers twitched and the other shuriken whirred dangerously towards those that still chased him. Kakashi, eyes wide from what he had just seen, shuriken without seal tags exploding with enough force to take down a small house, spat out a foul curse and ran away from the homing shuriken. The other ninjas that were charred by the bomb seemed to be suffering this as well. Naruto wasn't surprised when Kisame revealed Samehada and the sentient sword gulped down the spinning bomb. Black smoke blew out from its horrifying mouth and it squealed in mild distaste that there was no chakra in the bomb for it to absorb. I How long before my destabilizer comes back online? 2 more minutes, sir. Naruto's chakra destabilizer needed 5 minutes to recharge after each use so as to prevent I from not melting from the effort. Naruto pursed his lips and thought of what he could do to keep the pursing trackers and sound shinobi from catching him, until he burst into a wide glade 5 miles from the fire grass country border. I had wisely taken the route through grass country to waterfall so that any stragglers that went after Naruto were, hopefully, thrown off. The inventor turned around in the air and massive snapping teeth snapped at his face, making the boy flip backwards and land on his hands, pushing back again onto his feet and crossing his computer-augmented katana across his chest as Kisame attempted to plant a foot into his chest. Naruto ground his teeth and shoved the man and his weapon back. I guess it's too late to say this, but I need you to come with me. Kisame grunted with a sharp smirk, holding Samehada to his right, off the ground. A glorious feat of strength that he hoped would intimidate the red-eyed child. I'd rather die. Naruto spat and threw his sword over his shoulder, where it soared away from him to only Kami knows where. Kakashi landed several feet behind Naruto and breathed out a sigh of relief as 2 bombs went off, taking with it a sound 4-member. The boy moved around and shuffled back so that he could see both of the strong shinobi, seeing Orochimaru's dot linger at the edge of the glade, watching. Kisame looked at the boy and whistled. Cool gear, kid. Along with Naruto's white, short-sleeved button-up shirt and his black pants with purple suspenders, Naruto was also wearing large dark brown boots that went up 3 inches above his ankles and large brown gloves that went 2 inches over his wrists. There were also dented silver, segmented plates that rose up from the gloves and boots and reached Naruto's elbows and just under his knees, over his pants, contrasting the color of the gloves and boots. He looked like he had metal arms and legs with the way he looked, and Kisame, suspecting that this boy was closely related to Kushina, was smart not to underestimate him by just his looks, especially with the black-tinted, black goggles the boy was wearing over his bright red eyes. Where'd you get it? None of your business, was the child's answer, and he lowered into a fighting style. Kakashi chuckled a little with his eye closed into a smile to lessen the palpable tension that surrounded the 3 of them like a thick cloud. He motioned for Naruto to calm down. There's no need for violence, Naruto. We just want to get you back home safely. Your mother is worried sick. Looking at the boy now, he looked nothing like who he thought he knew. The Naruto he knew was always smiling and always happy, curious and ever willing to learn, even if Kushina never let him learn from anyone but herself. This Naruto, the one in the dreaded steam scorpion fighting style of Whirlpool Country, looked like a cornered animal, ready to bite off anyone's head if they got too close. He had shadows under his eyes and he was paler. He looked so very tired and yet so very stubborn. He really looked like he would preferably take his own life than go back home. Kakashi began to wonder if he ever really knew Naruto at all. The boy before him frowned and muttered. If you attack me, Kakashi, I will kill you. Like how he had killed anyone unfortunate enough to find him, and like how he had maimed Kimimaro, Kabuto and Orochimaru. Any person that was going to jeopardize his bid for freedom was going to die, and Naruto wouldn't even think much of it. The copy ninja knew the boy's genius and that he was trained by the red-hot-blooded habanero, Kushina. Naruto could potentially do some damage to him, a prodigy in his own right, but he could not reconcile the fact that Naruto would intentionally hurt him. You don't mean that. Try me. His sword was damaged from Kisame's kick and he had used up half of his shuriken supplies, but he was going to squash these 2 future threats. I warned you. The legendary ninja shrugged and his body disappeared in a blur of speed. Naruto's light red eyes darkened and his irises shrank slightly, watching the masked man and the shark man come at him from both sides. They were coming too fast for him to make the command, so he skipped back twice and faced both hands at them. That's my line. Wind daggers. Transparent wind knives shot out from his palms, and the 2 ninjas, not knowing the consequences of being in a 3-foot radius of the wind attacks, dodged by sidestepping what they could see. They could not see that at the end of each dagger were sharp currents of wind that followed the tip of the knife. The wind manipulation attack could best be described as an invisible drill that widened from the tip to the base, like a drill, and the base comprised of sharp wind that, if the tip didn't get the target, could potentially fatally scratch the target. Kakashi groaned as his left arm dropped onto the ground with a wet thump, leaving only a stump and a large, missing chunk of his side, while Kisame lost half of his head and most of his right shoulder. The boy could feel the heat from using the wind-based attack and poured out 3 more conical wind dagger attacks at Samehada as the sentient sword attempted to come at him. The weapon swallowed the dangerous blasts of wind and instantly fell onto the ground, writhing in agony. While it could absorb the chakra in a wind attack, rendering it useless, Naruto's wind dagger attacks were completely deadly because it had not chakra to suck out to make harmless, so the daggers in Samehada simply grinded its insides as the pointed tip tunneled outwards before they lost strength when they didn't get too far. Naruto hummed as he observed the effect of his only wind attack with the gloves. He needed to save this wind-based attack under his newly created, personal folder of elemental manipulations, under the highest level, so far. File wind dagger under wind manipulation, level 5. Yes, sir, I said, ordered what Naruto had done. He took down an A rank and an S rank with a single attack. Kisame was melting into a puddle of water, no doubt weakened by the wind, and his sword, Samehada, silently twitched beside its wielder, forcefully supplying chakra to the man to save his life. Kakashi looked like he was going to pass out from blood loss at any moment from his severed arm. The supercomputer then said, "Two unidentified ninjas have appeared. Yeah, I see them," Naruto said in a low voice, his red eye fixed on two new red dots that hid on the opposite side of the glade, opposite of Orochimaru. Dutifully, I rolled down a list of what it was able to gather from both secret watchers. One had fire affinity while the other, strangely enough, was predominantly made out of nature chakra. They both had incredible chakra control and only the fire affinity watcher had massive reserves. Chakra was concentrated to the person's eyes and this meant the fire affinity guy had a dojutsu. I don't care about them, as long as they stay out of my way, Naruto said, and he shot another wind dagger at Kisame's head, effectively ripping it apart. He turned to Kakashi and the man's whole body had just finished entering the ground, with his arm. "Damn it. Do you want me to put a bug on him, sir?" Referring to a small feature Naruto had added to his glove where he would shot out a small black dot-like piece of machinery and this dot would seek out the copy ninja, wherever it was, and attach itself to the man, serving as a spy. "It would be a waste of a bug. I already have one in Konoha," he answered the loyal computer, seeing the Konoha ninja's red dot blip and beep as it tore towards Konoha. He looked at the Sannin and felt a chill run through him as his eyes made contact. Naruto then ordered, realizing that his phobia of women was more complicated than he initially thought. "Give me a small shock if it looks like I'm about to pass out." His encounter with the Sannin made him realize that not only was he scared of females but he was absolutely terrified of powerful females, especially if they made physical contact. It would explain why he hadn't fainted when the women in the brothel or his Yakuza neighbor had touched him. He didn't see them as a threat, yet he still feared them. When it came to strong women like his mother, then any courage or confidence he managed to scratch up from his gut would leave him. I answered affirmatively, understanding why its creator had said so and the conditions before it could shock Naruto back to reality. That was the only short-term cure in case he froze up ever again before a scarily strong woman, of which there were more than plenty on the continent. He didn't like having panic attacks, no one did, and now that he was in the outside world and he would most definitely encounter more people, the last thing he wanted was to fall onto the ground in a dead faint. He faced his eyes on Kisame, at the bloody crater that used to be his head, and contemplated taking Samehada with him. He thought this through for only 2 seconds before he shook his head. He didn't trust any sentient creature that he did not build himself. Throughout his kidnapping and escape he had not made use of a single drop of chakra and he could mask his smell with that of the forest, but the only loose end he could see were the 3 powerful feeling ninjas hiding in the shadows at the edge of the glade. He looked at Orochimaru pointedly and then he narrowed his eyes when he saw complete admiration and interest spin in the Sannin's reptilian eyes. She was likely aware that if she came after Naruto at that moment he would shred her body to pieces with a few drill-like wind daggers, which meant that she was hesitant of him, but he could also read her rapt attention, as her eyes shone in the dark like light bulbs. She retreated backwards as the boy tilted his head to the side and pointed his right palm at her. When the red dot on the flat map of Fire Country symbolizing her went backwards to scrap up what was left of the Sound 4 and her other subordinates, Naruto dropped his hand and muttered to Ai. "Power down the wind fans on my gloves to conserve power." He had already used a lot of wind manipulation attacks and it was seriously overheating his inventions. An outline of Naruto's body blinked at the top right corner and his hands were flashing red. The computer mutely complied. The inventor looked to the side of his goggles at the map and hummed at the lack of detail on the map. He had made this map based on physical maps and stories he overheard in the bar. There wasn't much to it. He noticed that I began adding details to the forest he was currently in, like common trees, shrubs, height of the trees, density of the nature chakra on the air, animal and insect life in the forest and some other things, rolling it down the other side of the goggles. He sifted through this new input of knowledge from his supercomputer and nodded in approval at the intricate detail I used in storing the information. When he could, the inventor planned to build an artificial satellite or two that would revolve around the planet and constantly feed him data, so he wouldn't ever be caught unaware by anything or anyone. As these plans rushed through the genius's mind, he saw the fading red dots of the sound shinobi going away from his position. He didn't know when 30 minutes ran by of him simply standing in place and speaking under his breath, muffling his lips so that they won't be read. The two watchers patiently spied on him. Naruto, not to their surprise, turned around and stared directly at them for 10 long seconds before he said, "Don't follow me." I provided the clear path to Waterfall Country for its master and Naruto followed it, speaking in whispers to the computer. "I think I should change Wind Dagger to Wind Tunnel or maybe even Wind Stake." "Why, sir? My wind manipulation looks and acts nothing like a dagger but more like a drill." "Then why not call it Wind Drill, sir?" I provided and Naruto shook his head. "That's already the name of a wind release jutsu and I'm not using chakra," meaning that Naruto wasn't using a wind jutsu but wind manipulation. What he was doing was raw and less refined than anything wind jutsu could do but no less powerful. "Ah, I understand. Save it as Wind Tunnel until I think of a better name." "Yes, sir." The boy leisurely jumped from tree to tree, suppressing his chakra till it could barely be felt in the choking nature chakra around him. "Show me my bag." A green dot, the same color as the dot that showed him, appeared on the map at the very edge of the country, a few miles north of him. He had all of his possessions inside, the ones that could fit. Clothes, shoes, soap, his toothbrush and toothpaste, his towel, his projectors, which were all folded up into 10 hand-sized cubes, 5 sets of 10 exploding shuriken and 5 sets of 10 exploding kunai, a flat, disc-shaped bomb that could level a small town, 2 tins of coffee, 2 cups, a plate and a pot, some spoons, and lastly was exactly 50,620 rue of saved money from his former job in the brothel. Anything he forgot or couldn't pack, he could buy in Waterfall, on his way up north to Iron Country. The bag itself was altered by the boy so that it could be remotely controlled by I and him when it became too inconvenient to carry it, such as when he was kidnapped. His damaged sword and sheath were currently on the bag. When he was getting low on money, he would work as a bounty hunter, seeing as that seemed to be more lucrative than working on odd jobs. Naruto broke through the treetops with a flip and refrained from whooping in pure joy. He inhaled and exhaled deeply, continuing his sprint. He was free but he couldn't relax. "Not yet. How's my pace, I?" "You are doing well, boss. Only an hour before you reach Shirobakawa town. Are you tired?" "No. I've never been so energetic in my life." The upgrade Naruto gave I concerning its memory and processing speed evolved and the computer said, "Well done, boss." "Thank you, I." The boy landed on a strong branch and bolted on. "Gather what you can about Shirobakawa and direct me to the nearest tech store, and if they don't have one then we'll find a place to rest for the night and move out to the next town with a tech store in the morning." "On it, boss." The red-eyed boy was ready to build, and before the other nations caught wind of his escape from Konoha, he was going to arm himself to the teeth. Konoha had prevented any leak of him running away from the Namika's mansion for years, and this information was possibly leaked out of the village to Orochimaru by an unknown spy, possibly Kabuto. Information was an important commodity and it reached important ears at lightning speed. Countries and villages that were enemies of Konoha would look for him, no doubt about that. Just like how Naruto had hidden under the leaf's nose for 4 years and they never caught wind of him, he would hide from the world until he was well and truly ready to come out, and when he did come out he would bring hell with him. The boy snatched up his duffel bag as he passed it, running on with quick steps to the closest town in Waterfall as he broke through the border of the country. "We start work on my gloves and boots as soon as we get the right supplies. Give me a list of what we need to finish the combat gloves and boots for schematic number 37, the very latest design he had for his gloves and boots. While you're at it, bring out satellite schematic number 15 and show me a list of the things I need to build it." "How many satellites, sir?" I said as it obeyed, showing Naruto a long list of items he needed for the plan for design for his gloves and boots, as well as guided the boy through the night towards the town. The gloves and boots idea also comprised of Naruto's latest drawing of his elemental manipulations. There was a lot going on in Naruto's goggles, and in his mind, and it was enough to dizzy anyone not used to being constantly busy. Naruto hummed with his lips pursed. 2. For now. All right, sir. Good. The genius said in a quiet voice and divided his attention between improving his latest design for his satellites and running on the red, lit-up path I provided for him. For him, multitasking like this was a gift he acquired from years of practice. One thing Naruto excelled in, besides engineering and mechanics, was hiding. Most of the countries of the planet were after his head, his blood, his body and or his sperm, and that made hiding harder. Naruto disappeared into the night and it would take the world 3 months before they found him again. Next time on Red Lights, Kushina's hands itched to just wring out the life from Kakashi's body, squeeze his neck until his throat popped, his lungs collapsed and he shit in his pants. She tucked away a stubborn strand of red hair over her ear and said, her now black painted lips frowning lightly, so lightly that it didn't make a single wrinkle on the redhead's porcelain pale, beautiful face. X. Am I the only one that saw my son's genius? Am I the only one? She placed a hand over her heart and sighed, closing her eyes and shaking her head forlornly. Am I the only one that saw this coming? X. The boy felt a smile tug onto his lips when he saw the S-rank sections of the bingo book. X. Naruto would be a great asset to the Akatsuki. The leader of the Akatsuki hummed and said, do we know where he is? That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.